Hello and welcome to Indus News live from Islamabad. I'm GOVT and these are the headlines. The Russian Defense Ministry says one of its warships fired warning shots at a British destroyer after it entered the Russian waters in the Black Sea. The ministry said a Russian jet also dropped bombs in its path to force it to change course. The UK has denied the claims, saying the ship was sailing in the Ukrainian waters and that it believes the Russians were undertaking a military drill. Libya's interim prime minister has sought help to withdraw foreign fighters as he addressed UN-sponsored talks in Berlin aimed at shoring up the peace process. Abdulhamid Dabeibe, who was appointed to lead a unity government in March, told the meeting that insecurity has jeopardized the transition. The talks are focused on harnessing support to ensure planned elections go ahead in December and unifying the fragmented armed forces. An airstrike has killed 43 people in Ethiopia's Tigray region, where fighting has escalated between the government troops and the rebels in recent days. Several others, including a 2-year-old child, is being treated at a hospital in Mekelle. A spokesman for the military did not confirm nor deny the incident, but said airstrikes are a common military tactic and the force does not target civilians. Pakistan says enhanced cooperation with Turkey will help a positive impact on regional peace and stability. Pakistan's Army Chief General Qamar Javed Bajwa said this in a meeting with Turkish Defense Minister Hulusi Akar during his day-long visit to Turkey. According to the military's media wing, the two sides discussed the recent developments in the Afghan peace process and bilateral defense cooperation. Pakistan has received another batch of 2 million doses of the SINOVAC COVID-19 vaccine from China. The country has reported 39 deaths and 930 infections in the past 24 hours. Meanwhile, Brazil has registered over 2,100 deaths from COVID-19 and nearly 88,000 infections overnight. Globally, the virus has claimed more than 3.8 million lives and infected over 179 million people so far. Those were the headlines and detailed stories. Right after a short break, stay tuned. Welcome back, and now with the news in detail. The Russian Defense Ministry says one of its warships fired warning shots at a British destroyer after it entered the Russian waters near Crimea in the Black Sea. The ministry said a Russian jet also dropped bombs in its path to force it to change course. The UK has denied the claims, saying the ship was sailing in the Ukrainian waters and that it believes the Russians were undertaking a military drill. The Russian Defense Ministry said the incident was a violation of UN laws, while Ukraine described the Russian actions as aggressive and provocative. Russia annexed Crimea from Ukraine in 2014, but this has not been recognized internationally. It has frequently expressed anger at the visits of NATO warships to the Black Sea, casting them as destabilizing. Libya's interim prime minister has sought help to withdraw foreign fighters as he addressed UN-sponsored talks in Berlin aimed at shoring up the peace process. Abdulhamid Dabeibe, who was appointed to lead a unity government in March, told the meeting that insecurity has jeopardized the transition. The talks are focused on harnessing support to ensure planned elections go ahead in December and unifying the fragmented armed forces. Speaking before the start of the talks, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken said participants share the goal of a sovereign, stable and unified Libya. Over the past year, Libya has made a progress in addressing a decade of chaos and violence that had threatened to escalate into a full-scale conflict. Rival administrations in the East and the West had agreed on a ceasefire and accepted the formation of the Abiy's unity government. An airstrike has killed 43 people in Ethiopia's Tigray region, where fighting has escalated between the government troops and the rebels in recent days. Doctors in Mekelle said they are treating dozens of people, including a 2-year-old child left injured by the airstrike. Medics said the Ethiopian military stopped them from reaching the site of the attack to help the wounded. A spokesman for the military did not confirm nor deny the incident, but said airstrikes are a common military tactic and the force does not target civilians. This comes a day after residents said new fighting had flared in recent days north of the regional capital, Mekelle. In Yemen, the Saudi-led coalition says it has intercepted and destroyed an explosive-laden drone launched by the Houthi rebels. The coalition said the drone was launched towards the Jizan province in the southern region of the kingdom. The Houthi rebels have yet to comment on the incident. This comes a day after the coalition forces downed a Houthi drone targeting the Hamis Mushayt region in Saudi Arabia. Iran says the U.S. has agreed to remove all sanctions on Tehran's oil and shipping sectors as Vienna talks to revive the 2015 nuclear deal. Presidential Chief of Staff Mahmoud Owaizi says Washington has also agreed to take some senior Iranian figures off a blacklist. He said more than 1,000 sanctions will be lifted under the agreement. Earlier, Iranian President Hassan Rouhani also said the main issues in the Vienna talks have been settled. However, Germany's Foreign Minister Heiko Maas said talks have been making progress, but still major hurdles remain to be overcome. The talks adjourned 2 days after a hardliner, Ibrahim Raisi, won presidential elections in Iran. Iran says it has foiled a sabotage attempt against a building of the Iranian Atomic Energy Organization. Iranian state media said the assault caused no loss of life or property damage. It said the tight security precautions adopted following similar acts on Iranian nuclear sites and scientists guarded against any damage. Investigators are working to identify the perpetrators and determine the facts surrounding the incident. Iran has denounced a UN Human Rights Council report on Tehran's violations as propaganda. Iran's permanent envoy in Geneva, Ismail Baghai Khamenei, addressed a session of the council. He said some biased states have for long instrumentalized human rights as part of their agenda against Iran. Khamenei said Iran is fully committed to the protection and promotion of human rights and respects its international obligations. He called on the world to uphold the principles of non-selectivity and eliminate double standards. Earlier, UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, Michelle Bachelet, expressed concern over the widespread use of death penalty in Iran. The U.S. has called for an end to violence in Afghanistan, blaming the Taliban for much of the bloodshed. Talking to reporters, State Department spokesperson Ned Price urged all sides to engage in serious negotiations for a political settlement. He termed peace talks between the Kabul government and the Taliban the only way to end 40 years of war. Meanwhile, the Taliban have claimed to capture 4 more districts in Paktia, Ghazni and Badakhshan provinces. A Taliban spokesperson said they have arrested 150 Afghan soldiers and seized several vehicles and ammunition. In Kandahar, Afghan police said 5 civilians were killed and 20 more wounded last night in a roadside blast. So far, no group has claimed the responsibility for the attack. U.S. Senator Lindsey Graham has warned that ignoring Pakistan while withdrawing from Afghanistan could lead to a disaster. In a series of tweets, Graham said Washington cannot pull out effectively without coordinating with Islamabad. He cautioned that ignoring Pakistan on the issue will be a major disaster worse than the blunder in Iraq. The Republican criticized the Biden administration for believing that America's problems in Afghanistan have ended. Graham added Biden's reluctance to reach out to Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan is stunning. In occupied Kashmir, Indian troops martyred a Kashmiri during a military raid in Shopian district. On Monday, 3 Kashmiris were gunned down in a similar raid in Baramulla district. Fake encounters and extrajudicial killings of Kashmiris have become a new norm in the region after India revoked its autonomy in August 2019. More than 300 Kashmiris have been martyred since then. China has condemned a U.S. warship's latest transit of Taiwan Strait, calling Washington the region's greatest security risk creator. The U.S. Navy has been conducting such operations in the sensitive waterway on a regular basis now. The People's Liberation Army said it monitored the U.S. vessel throughout its passage and warned it. It added the U.S. is playing the same old tricks and disrupting peace in the strait. Meanwhile, the U.S. Navy said the guided missile destroyer USS Curtis Wilbur conducted a routine transit. The Navy reiterated that the transit demonstrates U.S.'s commitment to a free and open Indo-Pacific. The United States says it will continue to seek dialogue with North Korea over its nuclear program. This comes a day after North Korean leader's sister Kim Jo-young rejected an early resumption of talks. State Department spokesperson Ned Price said Pyongyang's remarks have not changed the U.S. view on diplomacy. Price said a calibrated, practical and open approach is needed for the denuclearization of the Korean peninsula. He reiterated Washington's offer to meet anywhere, anytime, without preconditions. The spokesperson said the U.S. continues to hope that North Korea will respond positively to its outreach. Illegal Israeli settlers have stormed East Jerusalem's Sheikh Jarrah neighborhood. They have threatened to forcefully expel 3 Palestinian families from their homes within 1 month. Israeli parliamentarians, police and the head of an extremist Jewish settlement organization also accompanied the settlers. In Blue City, the Israeli army handed demolition orders targeting 20 Palestinian homes as well as a mosque. Israeli police also forced a Palestinian to demolish his 3-story building in the town of Al-Isawiyah in occupied Jerusalem. Earlier, dozens of Israeli settlers forced their way into the Al-Aqsa Mosque compound. A recent study has found that over 30,000 U.S. troops have committed suicide since 2001. The study by Brown University shows the number is 4 times higher than those killed in actual combat. In his report, researcher Thomas Ben Sood said just above 7,000 troops were killed in post-9/11 war operations. The report reads the increasing rates of suicide in military personnel are outpacing those of the general population. The study cites trauma, stress, military's masculine culture, access of guns, and public indifference as major causes. Meanwhile, U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin has backed removing the prosecution of sexual assault from the military's chain of command. A Pentagon report estimated over 20,000 male and female service members experienced sexual assault in 2018. More stories to follow, but right after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back. Brazil has reported over 2,100 deaths from COVID-19 and nearly 88,000 infections overnight. Globally, the virus has claimed more than 3.8 million lives and infected over 179 million people so far. More in this report.
As vaccine shortages driven by global financial disparity continue to mar the fight against the pandemic, the Delta variant of COVID-19 threatens to erase all gains. A dramatic rise in infections has gripped Russia, which reported the highest number of daily deaths since early February. America's top immunologist, Anthony Fauci, has termed the Delta variant as the greatest threat to U.S. efforts to eliminate the virus. The White House says the United States will likely fail to meet President Joe Biden's goal to deliver at least one vaccine to 70% of adults by the 4th of July.
Well, we don't see it exactly like something went wrong. How we see it is we set a bold, ambitious goal, something the president has done from the very beginning. And we are expected to meet that goal just a couple weeks after July 4th. And in fact, at this point, as of today, we're going to be already at that point for people who are 30 years of age and older.
The World Health Organization says it is concerned about the easing of restrictions by nations hosting the Euro 2020 matches. The global health watchdog noted that some states are already seeing rising cases. Meanwhile, New Zealand has raised alert levels in its capital, Wellington, one level short of a lockdown, over the possible presence of the dangerous Delta variant.
We just held a special cabinet meeting, and out of an abundance of caution, the Wellington region will move to alert level 2 from 6 p.m. tonight, and that will run through at this point until 11:59 p.m. on Sunday.
In India, authorities have declared a new coronavirus variant to be of a variant of concern and said nearly 24 cases were detected in 3 states. Meanwhile, Brazilian federal prosecutors have opened a probe into a contract worth $320 million for 20 million doses of a vaccine made by an Indian firm. Moreover, China reportedly plans to keep border restrictions in place for at least another year amid fears over the emergence of new variants.
Pakistan has received another batch of 2 million doses of the SINOVAC COVID-19 vaccine from China. In a statement, the top health authority, NCOC, said the consignment is part of the planned contracted quantity purchased from China. The statement added the new shipment will considerably enhance the daily average vaccination process. So far, over 13.8 million vaccines have been administered across the country. The health ministry said the country's death toll has topped 22,000 with 39 more deaths overnight. It said 930 people tested positive for the virus in the past 24 hours, taking the caseload beyond 950,000. In Pakistan, the parliament has passed a resolution calling for an immediate restoration of the occupied Kashmir's autonomy and an end to illegal Indian occupation. The resolution urged India to abandon its efforts on turning the Hindu minority into a majority. It said that India should let Kashmiris exercise their right to self-determination. The resolution also added that New Delhi should immediately release all the political prisoners. Pakistan says enhanced cooperation with Turkey will have a positive impact on regional peace and stability. Pakistan's Army Chief General Qamar Javed Bajwa said this in a meeting with Turkish Defense Minister Hulusi Akar during his day-long visit to Turkey. According to the military's media wing, the two sides discussed the recent developments in the Afghan peace process and bilateral defense cooperation. It said the Army Chief acknowledged Turkey's engagement with Pakistan for ongoing efforts for peace in the region, while the Turkish Defense Minister hailed Pakistan's efforts for peace in the region, particularly Afghanistan. In Pakistan, at least 3 people have died in a blast in the eastern city of Lahore. Police say 21 others were injured after the explosion hit a residential area in Johar town. Lahore's deputy commissioner said the injured also included a police officer. He said it was not immediately clear what had caused the blast. The Counter-Terrorism Department has taken over the investigations. Meanwhile, Punjab's Chief Minister Usman Buzdar has directed the Inspector General Police to probe the incident. In Pakistan, a large number of Hindu community members held a protest in Islamabad demanding justice for the 11 Pakistani Hindus killed last year in Jodhpur, India. The protest was called by the All Pakistan Hindu Panchayat. Members of the Hindu community held demonstrations before the Indian High Commission condemning the mysterious killings. The protesters said the Indian government still has not handed over the bodies of the slain Hindus. On August 9th last year, 11 Pakistani Hindus were killed by Hindutva extremists in a village of district Jodhpur in Rajasthan state. Catalan separatist leaders have vowed to continue their struggle as they walk out of jail a day after the Spanish government pardoned them. The 9 leaders were jailed for their failed independence bid in 2017. The released politicians and activists were greeted by the pro-independence head of the Catalan regional government amid cheers and clapping from the supporters. Spain's Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez has said the decision is a step forward towards resolving a political conflict. But his opponents have accused him of using the pardons to gain political mileage. Russia has reiterated unconditional support for Syria's sovereignty, unity and territorial integrity. Russia's Deputy Prime Minister Yuri Borisov made the remarks in a meeting with Syrian President Bashar al-Assad in Damascus. Borisov reassured that Russia is ready to provide further comprehensive assistance to Syria. Meanwhile, Syrian media said al-Assad stressed the importance of continuing coordination with Russia. The meeting came just hours after the newly inducted British aircraft carrier claimed striking ISIS targets in Syria. In a statement, London said with new stealth jets, it is ready to deliver the hard punch of power against the enemy. Sudan has asked the UN Security Council to meet and discuss a dispute over a dam being built by Ethiopia on the Blue Nile. Sudan's Foreign Minister Maryam Sadiq al-Mahdi asked this in a letter to the Council's head. She urged the Council to immediately discuss the dam's impact on the security of millions of people. Sadiq al-Mahdi called on the Council head to urge Addis Ababa to stop the unilateral filling of the dam. Ethiopia is pinning its hopes of economic development and power generation on the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam. However, the two downstream countries, Egypt and Sudan, seek a binding agreement on the filling and the operation of the dam. The UK and Cambodia have vowed to further strengthen and expand their relations and cooperation for mutual benefits. The two sides gave the statement after British Foreign Secretary Dominic Raab arrived in Cambodia's capital, Phnom Penh. Raab is the first British Foreign Secretary to visit Cambodia since the UK reopened embassy there 30 years ago. British Foreign Secretary held talks with his counterpart, Prak Sokhonn, over trade, economic ties and Myanmar. Cambodia is set to take over the chairmanship of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations next year. In a tweet, Raab said London looks forward to working together more closely during Cambodia's ASEAN chairmanship. China has called on the world countries to promote closer international cooperation on human rights. Chinese envoy to the UN office at Geneva, Chen Shu, delivered a joint speech at the 47th UN Human Rights Session. He spoke on behalf of nearly 20 countries, including Russia, Belarus, Venezuela, Iran, and Egypt. Chen highlighted the West's hypocrisy in interfering in other countries' internal affairs under the pretext of human rights. He called on the Human Rights Council to carry out its work in accordance with the UN General Assembly resolutions. The envoy stressed the need to adhere to the principles of multilateralism and upholding international justice. The U.S. administration says it will investigate the dark history of Indian boarding schools. This comes after 215 indigenous children were found in a mass grave at a boarding school in Canada. Speaking at the National Congress of the American Indians, Interior Secretary Deb Haaland said the government will work to find the remains of the children who died in the schools. Haaland acknowledged that U.S. agencies try to eradicate indigenous culture, language, spiritual practices, and people. She said the Interior Department is positioned to carry out the probe as it oversaw the schools.
I'm coming to you all from the devastating history. Today, I'm announcing and sharing with you all, first, that the department will launch the Federal Indian Boarding School Initiative, At no time in history have the records or documentation of this policy been compiled or analyzed to determine the full scope of its reaches and effects. We must uncover the truth about the loss of human life and the lasting consequences of these schools.
China's President Xi Jinping has spoken to the in-space crew of the Shenzhou 12 manned spaceship. It is the first manned mission to Beijing's under-construction space station. Speaking at the Beijing Aerospace Control Center, President Xi extended greetings to the astronauts on behalf of the entire country. The president said the construction of China's space station is a milestone in Beijing's space cause. He said it will make pioneering contributions to the peaceful use of outer space by humankind.
You three are representatives of the numerous drivers and climbers serving China's space cause in the new era. I hope you will keep up the good work through close cooperation and successfully fulfill the remaining tasks. I wish everything is going well with your work and life in space, and we wait for your victorious return in Beijing.
The three astronauts are stationed in the space station's core module Tianhe. Now moving on, the UN's climate advisors have warned that climate change will reshape life on Earth in the coming decades despite controlled emissions. In its report, the International Panel on Climate Change said the choices made now will determine if our species thrive or simply survive. It said the dangerous thresholds are closer than once thought. The dire consequences of unbridled carbon pollution are inevitable in the short term. The report added that the worst is yet to come, as it will affect our next generation's lives far more than our own. The document, designed to influence critical policy decisions, is not scheduled for release until February next year. A mummy of an Egyptian man underwent a CT scan at a hospital in Milan as part of a research project. The remains of the mummy are believed to belong to an ancient Egyptian priest called N.KOREA. More in this report.
Ancient Egypt met modern medical technology when a mummy underwent a CT scan at a Milan hospital. The project, A Mummy to be Saved, aims to shed light on the light of the mummified man and the ancient Egyptian burial customs.
It's a sort of virtual autopsy. We can do a sort of fly-through inside the mummy. So we can study the mummy, we can reconstruct the life and the death of this person. We can also be sure about the sex because we can study the pelvis and we can measure him so we can understand how high he was.
Medical staff also carried out chemical and physical analysis to understand the type of products were used to mummify the body. The mummy and its sarcophagus has been in Bergamo since 1885 and were donated by an Italian ambassador who was living in Egypt.
We are not sure exactly if this mummy is really the priest, because in the past, with the antiquity market, was quite frequent to associate a mummy to another coffin.
Researchers say the analysis will also allow them to study ancient diseases and could help modern-day medical research.
It's the time for a short break. We'll be back with more stories. Stay tuned. And now the business updates. The U.S. stocks have opened mixed, with investors focused on business activity data after the Federal Reserve sought to calm fears of a sharp tapering of monetary stimulus. The tech-heavy Nasdaq Composite traded over 0.25% higher at open, while the Dow Jones Index opened fractionally lower. The S&P 500 traded close to 0.1% higher at open. Meanwhile, oil prices rose after an industry report on U.S. crude inventories reinforced views of a tightening market. And that is all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at Indus.News.